My floor manager, Linda, found me in the kitchen at 7:40 on a Tuesday night in October with her clipboard pressed against her chest and a look on her face I had never seen in 3 years of working together. "There's a family at table 4, she said. "They said they didn't need a reservation, that you'd understand." I understood immediately. I took off my apron, folded it over the stainless steel prep counter, and walked out through the kitchen doors. My father, David Harrison, was sitting at my best table with a glass of my house Cabernet he hadn't paid for. Beside him, my mother, Katie, scrolled through her phone with her reading glasses at the end of her nose, already bored before the conversation started. And there was Monica, my younger sister, leaning back with her arms crossed, scanning the room with the evaluating expression she'd worn her entire life, like she was calculating what should rightfully belong to her. I stopped at the edge of the table. I didn't sit down. I needed the height. "There she is," my father said. He smiled like no time had passed, like the last 5 years were a minor administrative delay. "Look at this place." "You need to leave," I said. "I have a full house in 20 minutes. "We drove 2 hours, Emily." My mother set down her phone. "The least you can do is hear us out." My father reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and slid a folded document across the table without standing up. "We had a lawyer draw it up. It's clean. You sign tonight, Monica gets a 15% silent partnership stake in your restaurant, and we're done. No drama." I didn't touch the paper. I hadn't spoken to any of them in 5 years. The last time I did, I was 18 years old, standing on the front porch of our house in San Antonio with a backpack and $180 in cash, because my sister had told a lie and my parents had chosen to believe it without asking me a single question. I'm going to tell you that story, but first I need you to understand what was sitting on that table. My name is Emily Williams. I'm 28 years old. The restaurant behind me, Grove, is mine. Every detail of it, the reclaimed oak on the walls, the brass lettering above the door, the 2 Austin Chronicle Best New Restaurant Awards framed in my office, 32 employees, a commercial lease with a landlord who trusts me, and a folder on my laptop with 847 rows of financial documentation that I had been building quietly and deliberately for 9 years. That folder is also part of this story. "You had a lawyer draft a document giving my sister a stake in my business," I said. "Then you drove 2 hours and showed up unannounced to have me sign it tonight." "We knew you wouldn't take our calls," Katie said. "There's a reason for that, Wren." She used the old nickname. I felt it land and I let it pass. "There is a reason," I said, "and you know exactly what it is." My father's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. "You sign tonight," he said, "or this gets complicated. I know Paul Silver holds your commercial lease. One phone call from me and your life gets very difficult, very fast." There it was, the threat underneath the smile, the reason they had driven 2 hours on a Tuesday. I looked at him for a long moment. I kept my face completely still. I'd had 5 years to practice that stillness. "Give me until end of service," I said. 10 o'clock. I'll come back to this table and we'll talk." He leaned back, satisfied. He picked up my wine. "That's all we're asking." I walked back through the kitchen doors. I did not panic. What happened next required me to be very calm, and I was, because I had been preparing for this moment for years. Not this exact Tuesday, not this specific table, but the shape of it, the return, the hands out, the smile that assumed I was still exactly who I'd always been to them. I was not that person anymore. I took out my phone and typed one message. "They're here. Table 4. Need you. Don't let me sign anything." 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "On my way." If you've ever been the one your family called difficult, the dramatic one, the ungrateful one, the one who needed to calm down, type "me" in the comments. This story is for you. Let me tell you who I actually am before I tell you how that night ended. I'm 28 years old. I've worked in professional kitchens since I was 18, not as a hobby, not as a phase, as a survival strategy that turned into a vocation, that turned into a business that now employs 32 people and clears a number I would not have believed if you'd told me about it that first night I slept in my car. Grove opened in November 2021. I was 26. The build-out took 8 months and cost me $340,000, which I financed through a combination of a small business loan I qualified for on my own merits, 4 years of savings, and one private investor who believed in the concept before the walls were up. No family money, no co-signers from anyone named Harrison, no phone calls wishing me luck, no cards, no one at the opening night table that I'd grown up calling family. The menu is mine. The wine program is mine. The reclaimed oak on the walls, I drove to that mill in Bastrop on a Saturday in February with a truck I borrowed from my sous chef because I couldn't afford a rental that month, and I loaded the planks myself. The brass lettering above the door, the playlist that runs through the dining room from open to close, curated by me, updated monthly, because I believe the music is as important as the food. I built every detail of this place because I had learned, early and permanently, that if you want something to last, you build it yourself and you document everything. The documentation matters. Let me explain the folder. In March of 2019, I applied for a small equipment loan at a credit union in East Austin, a deck oven and a commercial refrigeration unit I needed to expand the catering work I was doing at the time. The loan officer called me 2 days later. My credit report showed an open personal loan from a lender in San Antonio, originated in September 2015. The balance at origination, $32,000. The name on the account, Emily Christine Williams. I was 19 years old in September 2015. I did not take out a $32,000 loan. I did not sign anything. I did not know that account existed until a stranger at a credit union in Austin told me it was destroying my score. I spent 3 days pulling records before I understood what had happened. And when I called my father and laid it out, calmly, with the account number and the origination date in front of me, he told me that I had been living under his roof and eating his food for 18 years, and that this was just what family does, and that I should handle my own financial responsibilities like an adult. I hung up. I did not call back. It took me 2 years and 1 month to pay off that loan. $1,400 a month from my line cook salary and catering income and whatever shifts I could pick up on weekends. I finished in April 2021, 7 months before Grove opened. I kept every payment receipt, every bank statement, every document from the origination through the final zero balance. 847 rows in a spreadsheet that I updated manually every month for 2 years. They had no idea I'd been keeping records since the day I found it. They also had no idea that I'd known about it since 2019 and never once mentioned it. Not because I'd forgiven it, because I was waiting for the right moment to put everything on the table at once. That moment turned out to be a Tuesday in October at table 4 with a glass of wine they hadn't paid for and a lawyer's document they expected me to sign before close. I need to take you back, because the loan wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even close. I grew up in San Antonio in a house on Crescent Bluff Drive with a bedroom that had a window facing the backyard oak tree, parents who ran a small property management company, and a sister 4 years younger than me who was, from the time she could talk, the undisputed center of our family's gravitational field. Monica was, and I want to be precise here because I'm not interested in being unfair, genuinely charming when she wanted to be. She had the kind of easy confidence that makes rooms arrange themselves around you. She was my mother's favorite in the way that was never said aloud, but was present in every decision, every allocation of attention, every small daily choice about whose feelings were the priority in any given moment. I didn't resent Monica for being charming. I resented what it cost me. I was the one who got straight A's and heard, "Of course you did." Monica got a C+ in algebra and got a pizza dinner and a long conversation about how hard middle school was and how proud they were of her for trying. I was the one who ran the household schedule during the 6 weeks my mother had her gallbladder surgery when I was 15, making sure Monica got to dance practice, managing the grocery runs, covering the phone calls my father didn't want to deal with. Nobody thanked me. It was assumed. That was always the word that fit best. My competence was assumed, and Monica's struggles were events that required the family's full attention. I had made peace with that arithmetic, or something close to peace, by the time I turned 18. And then came March 14th, 2014. My grandmother, my father's mother, Ruth Harrison, had passed away the previous fall. She had left very little, but among what she left was a pearl necklace. A single strand, freshwater pearls in a cream-colored box with silk interior. It had been appraised at $1,400.
My grandmother had told me twice in the last year of her life that she wanted me to have it. She'd said it in front of my mother both times. 3 weeks after the funeral, my mother told me the necklace was in her jewelry box for safekeeping and that she'd give it to me when I was older. I was 17. I let it go. On the evening of March 14th, 2014, my mother came to my bedroom door with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between grief and fury and a decision that had already been made. She told me the pearl necklace was missing, that it had been found that afternoon, under my mattress.
I told her I had never touched it. I told her I didn't know how it got there. I told her calmly, and then I told her less calmly, and then I was crying in a way I hadn't cried since I was a small child, because I understood from the way she was standing, from the way she wouldn't fully meet my eyes, that this conversation wasn't an investigation. It was a sentencing. Monica was 15. She had been in my room that week. I'd seen her, twice, looking for a charger. I said that. My mother said I was deflecting. My father appeared in the doorway. He didn't ask me a single question. He looked at me with an expression I had seen before in smaller doses, but never at full strength. Something that was not quite anger and not quite coldness. Something more like the patience of a man confirming something he had long suspected. He told me to pack what I needed and that I could come back for the rest when I'd figured out how to be accountable. I packed a backpack. Jeans, 2 sweaters, my school ID, my social security card, my journal, and $180 in cash from a jar in my desk where I kept my babysitting money. Monica was standing in the hallway when I walked out. She didn't say anything. She looked at the floor. For 1/2 second, I thought she was going to speak. Then she stepped aside. My father closed the front door behind me without a word. Looking back, I should have seen the signs long before that night, but when you grow up inside something, you don't see the shape of it until you're standing outside in the cold. It was 41 degrees. I sat in my car, a 2008 Honda Civic that I'd bought with babysitting money, in the driveway of my own house for an hour before I drove away. I didn't know where I was going. I drove to a parking lot near a 24-hour pharmacy on Babcock Road, and I sat there until I fell asleep. I slept in that car for 3 nights. I want you to understand what 3 nights in a car in March means when you're 18 years old and you genuinely don't know if anyone is going to call. My phone stayed charged because I plugged it into the car. I ate a gas station sandwich the first night and a bag of crackers the second morning because I didn't want to spend money I wasn't sure I could replace. I kept the heat running in 20-minute intervals so I didn't drain the battery. I folded my second sweater into a pillow, and I lay across the back seat of a 2008 Honda Civic, and I thought about the pearl necklace sitting in a cream-colored box in my mother's jewelry drawer. And I thought about the fact that my father had looked at me from that doorway and not asked a single question. And I thought about Monica stepping aside in the hallway, and what that step had cost her, and whether she had lost any sleep over it at all. I didn't tell anyone. Not my 2 closest friends from school, not my aunt in Houston who would have wired me bus money without asking why, not Janet who lived 2 streets over and whose kitchen light I had seen glowing through her window 100 times walking home from school. I was too ashamed. There is a particular kind of shame that comes not from what you've done, but from what has been decided about you, and I carried it those 3 days like something physical, a weight I didn't know how to set down. On the morning of the 3rd day, I checked my bank balance, $162, and drove to a pharmacy to wash my face in the restroom sink. Then I drove down Broadway because I didn't have a destination, and forward felt better than still. And I stopped at a diner called Copper Skillet, a family place, booths with red vinyl, pie under glass domes, the kind of restaurant that smells like coffee and butter all day long. I went in to use the restroom and warm up, and without fully planning it, I walked up to the counter and asked the man behind the register if they were hiring. His name was Jim Aldridge. He was 52, stocky, with flour on his apron and a coffee mug that looked like it had been refilled approximately 4,000 times. He looked at me for a moment, really looked, the way people rarely do, and asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. He didn't believe me, and he hired me anyway. His wife, Dorothy, came out from the kitchen 20 minutes later. She shook my hand, asked what I could do, and when I told her I could do anything she needed, she handed me an apron and pointed at the prep station. I'll come back to Jim and Dorothy, but I need to finish the timeline first.
I was 23 when I found the loan. 2 years of paying it off, $1,400 a month from every shift I could stack, while I was also trying to save for Grove. But here's what happened when I called my father. It wasn't just his dismissal that I recorded in the folder. It was the specific language he used. This is just what family does. As if my social security number was a shared resource. As if my credit history was a collective asset that belonged to whoever needed it most that quarter. He said Monica's business had needed the capital, that the deal didn't work out, that these things happen, and that I should be grateful for everything they provided during the 18 years I lived under their roof. I asked my mother separately by text, hoping for something different. She replied in 3 sentences. We intended to pay it back. Things got complicated. Let's not make this a big deal. I screenshotted every text. I saved every voicemail. I added them to the folder.
What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it, not because of what they did, but because of how clearly I finally saw what I had always been to them. Then came the opening of Grove, November 12, 2021. I sent physical invitations 6 weeks in advance, ivory cardstock, hand-addressed with the Grove logo and the address and a note in my handwriting that said I'd love for you to be there. I sent 3, one for my father and mother, one for Monica, and a backup email confirmation 2 weeks before the date. My mother opened the email. I know because the read receipt came through at 9:47 on a Wednesday morning. I reserved table 4, my best table, the one by the window with the Austin skyline, for the Harrison family. I told Linda to hold it until 10 o'clock, to keep the water glasses filled, to check in at 7 and again at 8. At 9:15, Linda came to the kitchen and told me the table was still empty. I nodded. I told her to clear the reservation. The night was full. Every other table, people who had believed in something they hadn't tasted yet, friends, neighbors, investors, strangers who'd read the early press. The room was everything I'd imagined it to be since that cocktail napkin at 2 in the morning. The food was right. The service was right. The lighting was exactly the warmth I'd spent months calibrating. And table 4 sat empty until midnight, perfectly set, 2 unlit candles and 4 water glasses nobody touched. The next morning, Monica posted on Instagram a photo of herself, my father, and 2 friends at a rooftop restaurant in San Antonio. Good lighting, good wine, everyone laughing. The caption said, "Family dinner, the best kind," posted at 8:47 p.m., while my opening was at full service. I looked at that photo for a long time. I saved it to my phone, then I closed the app and went back to reconciling my opening night receipts. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to show up and started planning for the moment they'd need something from me. I need to tell you about Jim and Dorothy before I go any further, because without them, there is no Grove, and without Grove, there is no story worth telling. I showed up at Copper Skillet on March 17, 2014, with a backpack and 3 days of bad sleep, and what I now understand was the particular hollow calm that sets in when you've cried everything out and what's left is just the next thing in front of you. Jim hired me on the spot at $11 an hour as a prep cook and server's assistant. He didn't ask me many questions that first day. He showed me where the knives were, how they ran their mise en place, and what time to come back on Thursday. Dorothy asked the question that mattered 2 weeks later. She found me in the parking lot after close, sitting on the hood of my Civic eating a piece of pie I'd brought out from the kitchen. She sat down next to me without asking if it was okay and said, quietly, "Where are you sleeping?" I told her. All of it. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't tell me my parents were wrong, though she must have thought it. She said, "We have a room above the storage unit out back. It's not much. You're welcome to it until you figure out your next step." I stayed 4 months. The room was small, a cot, a window that faced the alley, a heat spader that clicked through the night, and it was the safest I had felt since I was a child. There was a hook on the back of the door where I hung my jacket, a small shelf where I kept my textbooks from the community college classes I enrolled in that fall, a cracked mirror above a utility sink. I didn't have much. I didn't need much. What I needed was a door I could close from the inside and trust that it would stay that way. Dorothy taught me to cook. Not technically. I'd always been able to follow a recipe, but how to think about food, how to taste before you season, how to understand the difference between feeding people and making them feel cared for. She'd been cooking since she was younger than me, and she had the kind of knowledge that lives in the hands, and she gave it to me without ceremony, standing side by side at the prep station every morning before service started. She never talked about herself much. She asked questions. She remembered the answers.
When my birthday came in June that first year, she made a lemon cake from scratch and left it on the shelf in my room with a card that said, "You are exactly where you're supposed to be." It was the first birthday acknowledgement I had received from an adult in 4 years that didn't come with conditions attached. I cried in that room for about 20 minutes. Then I went down to the kitchen and started prep. Jim put me in the kitchen full-time after 6 weeks. He paid for a food handler's certification course. When I told him one evening over coffee that I wanted to own a restaurant someday, half expecting to see the polite skepticism I'd learned to expect from most adults, he looked at me without any particular surprise and said, "Then you should learn how every part of one works." He had me shadow the front of house, run the ordering, sit in on the monthly bookkeeping, not because it was my job, because he thought I should know. When I left San Antonio at 20 to move to Austin for a line cook position at a higher volume kitchen, Dorothy packed me a cooler of food for the drive, and Jim handed me an envelope. Inside was $500 in cash and a note in his handwriting. "You earned this. Keep going." I still have that note. It's in the same drawer as my food handler certificate. I invited Jim and Dorothy to the Grove opening with a personal phone call 6 weeks in advance. Dorothy cried a little on the phone. Jim said they wouldn't miss it for anything. On November 12th, 2021, while Table 4 sat empty, Jim and Dorothy Aldridge were at Table 7, the corner booth with the best sight line to the kitchen pass. Dorothy had brought flowers, Jim had put on a blazer. They stayed until I locked the front door, and when I finally sat down across from them at the end of the night, Jim looked around the room the way you look at something you watched being built from nothing, and he said, "There it is, kid." That was the whole sentence. That was enough. I met Janet Stacy 2 years later, in 2016, when I was 20 and working doubles at a restaurant on South Congress. But I had known her by sight my entire childhood. She had lived 2 streets over from the Harrisons on Crescent Bluff Drive for as long as I could remember. Silver-haired, precise in her movements, with the particular bearing of someone who has spent a long time in rooms where stakes are high and composure is non-negotiable. She had retired from 30 years of commercial litigation. She knew my parents well enough to have had opinions about them that she kept to herself. She found me at the restaurant. She sat at my section, ordered a glass of wine, and when I brought the check, she said, "I heard what happened. I'm sorry I didn't do more at the time." That was how it started. Over the next 2 years, Janet became the person I called when something confused me contractually, when a landlord clause looked wrong, when an investor term sheet had language I didn't understand. She looked at my first Grove business plan in October 2019 and circled 6 items that would have exposed me to personal liability before I opened the doors. She handed it back without a single discouraging word, only corrections. She is 71 now and still keeps regular hours. When I texted her from the Grove kitchen on that Tuesday in October, she was at my back door in 40 minutes. I watched her come through the kitchen in her gray blazer, silver hair, close cut, moving with the unhurried speed of someone who has walked into difficult rooms their entire life and is not remotely concerned about this one. She set her bag on my desk, opened her laptop, and said, "Tell me everything." For the first time in my adult life, I understood what it felt like to walk into a fight with someone in your corner, not because they had to be, because they chose to be. Janet listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands, a habit I'd come to recognize as her processing mode, and said 2 things. "The loan," she said, "the one in your name, you have documentation going back to origination? Everything. Original credit report, 9 years of bank statements, payoff receipts, the complete correspondence with my father when I confronted him in 2019, screenshotted and backed up in 3 places." She nodded. Then, "Your father just threatened to contact your commercial landlord. Paul Silver." "Yes. Paul and I have lunch together regularly," she set down the cup. "You don't need to worry about Paul." She was quiet for another moment. Then she asked me what I wanted to happen. I pressed my fingers flat on the desk and thought about the answer before I gave it. I told her I didn't want them escorted out by the police, even though she could make that happen in 20 minutes. I told her that if I did that, Monica drives back to San Antonio and the recorded confession disappears and the loan fraud disappears and the whole thing becomes a story about a daughter who called the cops on her family. I told her I wanted everything on the table, all of it, at once, in a room they couldn't leave gracefully. Janet looked at me for a long time, and then something shifted in her expression. Not a smile exactly, but the acknowledgement of someone recognizing a quality they respect. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said. I told her. When I finished, she opened her laptop. "I'll need an hour," she said. "Keep them at table 4. I fixed my expression in the small mirror on the back of my office door. I let my shoulders drop. I practiced the look I needed. Not defeated, not angry, just tired. The look of someone who has been holding a line for a long time and finally, reluctantly, decided it's easier to put it down. Then I went back out to the dining room. I asked Linda to bring a second bottle of wine to table 4 and a cheese board, compliments of the kitchen, I told her. Hospitality as theater, the optics of a daughter's softening. When I sat down at table 4, my mother looked up with a carefully neutral expression of someone who has been waiting and doesn't want to show how much. Monica was on her second glass. My father put his phone away. "I appreciate you waiting," I said. The word appreciate cost me something. I paid it. "Tell me about Monica's situation. I want to understand it before I say anything else." My father straightened in his chair with the ease of a man who believes he is running the room. He told me Monica had invested in a property development partnership in Dallas. The partner turned out to be fraudulent. Monica had lost her entire stake, and the investors were coming after her personally. The total exposure was somewhere around $200,000. "She needs collateral," my father said. "A 15% stake in Grove shows her creditors she has assets. It buys her time to negotiate." I nodded slowly, like I was processing the weight of it, like it was landing for the first time. I kept my hands folded on the table, not tense, not still, just present. The ambient sound of the restaurant moved around us, the low hum of the bar, the soft clink of glasses being cleared 2 tables over, the playlist I had curated myself, cycling through a song I had chosen on a Sunday morning 6 months ago. My restaurant, my room, my rules. Monica wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the table, turning her wine glass by the stem. I watched her for a moment and thought about the hallway on Crescent Bluff Drive, the way she had stepped aside, how little it had seemed to cost her then, how much it was going to cost her now. My mother reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. The gesture was so practiced, so perfectly calibrated, that I almost admired it. "We know we haven't been perfect," she said. "We know there's been distance, but you've always been the strong one, Emily, the one who didn't need anyone. Maybe we counted on that more than we should have. But right now, your sister needs you to be strong one more time." It was a masterful speech. It reframed 5 years of absence as a compliment to my character. It transformed what they had done into evidence of how capable I was. The specific, twisted arithmetic of people who have never once considered that their accounting might be wrong. I let a silence sit there, not long enough to feel hostile, long enough to look like consideration. I nodded slowly. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. They had no idea. It meant I was ready. I told them I needed to document the conversation for my accountant, standard practice for any business transaction over $10,000 where a verbal agreement preceded paperwork. I set my phone on the table against the small candle at the center and pressed record. My father glanced at the phone, then at me, then at the folder I'd placed on the table. He saw a daughter covering her bases. He saw paperwork. He did not see a trap. He confirmed his name. He confirmed the nature of the transaction. He confirmed that the purpose was to satisfy Monica's personal debt to her investors. He confirmed that Monica had no liquid assets at the time to cover the obligation herself. Then, I said carefully, that my accountant would also need to document any prior financial interactions between me and the family, just to establish that this was the first formal transaction and not part of a pattern of gifts for tax categorization purposes. The table went very quiet. I told them it would actually work in their favor. It would officially separate the old incident from this one, make the prior event go away on paper. I watched my father believe it. I watched the moment he decided the easy path was the honest one. "There was a loan taken in Emily's name approximately 9 years ago," he said, looking at the phone. "Approximately $32,000, used for family purposes, handled informally at the time. This current transaction is separate and distinct from that." "Thank you," I said quietly. I slid the document across the table. It was 11 pages. Dense, real, drafted in the hour Janet had spent at my desk while I kept the wine flowing. I indicated the flagged signature lines. Monica on the borrower line, Katie and David as guarantors. Monica picked up the pen. She turned to page 6, where a clause near the bottom of the page was printed in the same size font as everything else. She pointed to it. What does this mean? Asset guarantee. Standard for secured loans, I said. It means if you default, my company has a claim on your assets before any other unsecured creditor. It's just how the bank documentation requires it to be structured. She looked at me, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something real move across her face. Not quite shame, the shadow of it, the same shadow I'd seen in the hallway of our house on Crescent Bluff Drive when she stepped aside and let me walk out. If you pay this back, none of it matters, I said. My voice was soft, tired, the look of a sister worn down to something gentle. The clause never gets triggered. It's just protective paperwork. She signed. My father signed without reading it at all. My mother signed after looking only at the signature lines. The pen was still in my mother's hand when my phone buzzed on the table. One message from Janet. Transaction complete. Asset search done. She has a condo in San Antonio. Equity positive. $85,000. I picked up the phone. I stopped the recording. I need to tell you something, I said. My father looked up. The money I was going to wire to Monica's investors, I wired it this morning, but not to them. I set the phone face up on the table so they could see the screen. I bought the debt note. I paid Monica's investors 60 cents on the dollar. They were happy to take it. She was already in default, and they wanted out. Silence. What does that mean? Monica said. Her voice had gone flat. It means I'm your creditor now, I said. The $200,000 is still owed. It's just owed to me. The document you just signed confirms it's a personal obligation secured against your assets with no liquid means to satisfy it. I turned to my father. And you just confirmed on a recorded conversation that you took a loan in my name without my consent in 2015, which is fraud, which carries a 6-year statute of limitations in Texas, and which I have documented from origination through final payoff in a file with 847 rows of records. I paused. I'm not going to the police with that recording tonight, but I'm going to keep it indefinitely. My father's face had gone very still. The ease was completely gone. What was underneath it was something harder and smaller, the expression of a man who has just understood that the room he thought he was running was never his. You can't do this, my mother said. Her voice cracked for the first time all evening. Wren, this is your family. This is your sister. The dining room had thinned to its late-night rhythm, 2 tables lingering over dessert, the bar doing quiet business, the kitchen winding down behind the pass. Nobody at the surrounding tables was looking at us. We were just another family having a conversation. That was the thing about Grove's lighting. It was warm enough to make everything look intimate, private, contained. I had designed it that way. I had designed everything in this room. I turned to Monica. The anger I had expected to feel wasn't there. I want to be honest about that because people always expect anger in moments like this. They expect the eruption, the raised voice, the years of compressed feeling finally breaking the surface. But what was there instead was something quieter and more permanent, something that had been settling for 9 years and had finally reached the bottom. I spent 2 years paying off a debt I didn't take out, I said. I rebuilt my credit from nothing. I built this restaurant without a single dollar from any of you, without a phone call, without a cosign, without anyone in this family walking through that door once. Not when I got the lease, not when we opened, not when we won Best New Restaurant 2 years in a row, not one time. I stopped. I took a breath. I would have helped you, Monica, if you had just called me. If anyone in this family had called me like a person and asked, I would have helped. That was always true. Monica didn't say anything. She was looking at the table. Her hand was still wrapped around the wine glass she had stopped drinking from. I noticed that her knuckles had gone pale. That was the only sign. The asset guarantee gives me a legal claim on your condo, I said. I'm not going to foreclose on it. Janet will file a lien this week, which means you can't sell or refinance without satisfying the note first. You'll make monthly payments on a schedule she'll send you. 3% interest. It's less than you'd get anywhere else. This is extortion, my father said. It's a legal business transaction that you agreed to and signed in front of witnesses, I said. I stood and picked up the folder. I'm going to ask you to leave now. Linda will bring the check for the wine and the cheese board. We drove 2 hours, my mother said. Her voice was thin. There's a Marriott on the highway, I said. Janet can recommend a good one. I leaned slightly toward my father, close enough that only he could hear what I said next. You confirmed on a recording tonight that you took a fraudulent loan in my name. I have been carrying that for 9 years. I want you to understand something clearly. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing this because I am done being the only person in this family who pays for things. I pressed the silent button under the edge of the table, the one connected to the Austin PD non-emergency line, installed the week Grove opened, which I had never needed until now. Someone would arrive at the front entrance within 10 minutes. I walked back toward the kitchen without looking at the table again. Linda caught my eye near the bar. I gave her a small nod. She turned toward table 4 with the check presenter flat against her chest, and I pushed through the kitchen doors into the warmth and the noise and the smell of my restaurant. Janet was in my office. She looked up when I came in. It's done, I said. She took the folder, checked the signatures, checked the pages in sequence, and set it on the desk. Then she looked at me. How do you feel? I thought about it, honestly. Like I finally balanced the books, I said. She nodded once, the way she nodded when something was correct and didn't need elaboration. 6 weeks later, Janet filed the lien on Monica's San Antonio condo. The court processed it without incident. Monica set up automatic monthly payments in January, small, manageable, the kind that would stretch across years. She never called to argue. She never asked for a modified schedule. She never reached out at all. She just paid. Every third of the month, on time, the same amount, like clockwork. I don't know what she tells herself about it. I don't need to. My father left a voicemail from an unknown number 3 weeks after that Tuesday night. He talked for 4 minutes about fairness and legacy and what I was doing to the people who had raised me. He mentioned sacrifice. He mentioned gratitude. He mentioned the word family 11 times. He never once used the word daughter. Looking back at that entire evening, the document sliding across the table, the recorded confession, every sentence he said from the moment he walked into my restaurant, I realized he never had, not a single time. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. My mother sent a text. 4 words. I hope you're happy. I looked at it for a long time. I typed back 2 words, and I meant both of them completely. I am. Then I blocked the number. Grove had its best quarter in the first March after that Tuesday night. I hired 2 new line cooks and extended weekend hours through the summer. The reclaimed oak on the walls had aged to exactly the shade I'd imagined when I loaded those planks into a borrowed truck on a cold February morning, 2 years before we opened. The brass lettering above the door had developed a slight patina that I decided to leave. Some things earn their age. Jim and Dorothy came for Sunday brunch every other week. Dorothy always ordered the seasonal egg dish and always left a note on the napkin if she thought the seasoning was right. Jim always drank 2 cups of coffee and read the paper at the corner booth and occasionally looked up at the room with the expression of someone who knew the whole story and didn't need to say a word about it. I never had to explain anything to them. They had been there for the part that preceded all of this, and that was enough. Janet had standing Thursday lunches at the bar. She and Paul Silver had coffee once in a while, and I never asked what they talked about. Nobody called me cold for that Tuesday. Nobody called me dramatic. The people who knew the full story didn't need to call me anything at all. The lien on Monica's condo remained. The payments came in on schedule. My father's number stayed blocked. My mother's number stayed blocked. The folder with 847 rows stayed on my laptop, archived, closed. Not because I was done with it, but because I no longer needed to look at it to know what it contained. And on the last Sunday of every November, I put flowers on the table by the window, table 4, my best table, and I think about what it costs to build something real and what it costs to protect it, and how those 2 things turned out to be the same price. Blood made them relatives. It never made them family, but somewhere between a parking lot in San Antonio and a kitchen on South Congress and a brass sign above a door I built with my own hands, I found out what family actually was, and I never looked back.